About 18 million people passed through the Gulag camps, and another 1.6 million people died during the 4 decades that they were in operation. In 1924, after the death of Lenin, Stalin took power. He created the Gulag system as a way to control the people through fear and terror, as well as to exploit labor. The people sent to the camps were either prisoners, they were POWs from the Russian Civil War, they were political prisoners, or in some cases they were people who were labeled enemy of the people. This is a map showing the majority of the camps that were spread across the Soviet Union, and most of these camps had absolutely terrible conditions. The mortality rate in these camps was 4 to 6 times higher than it was through the rest of the Soviet Union. They were taken to the camps in trains such as this where the conditions were abysmal. With the lack of proper sanitation, water, or other necessities, many people died along the long journey. Those who did survive the journey found themselves in camps where it was a daily struggle to even survive. When they arrived at the camp, their personal belongings would be confiscated, they were often given prisoner uniforms, and families were separated from each other. In some camps, they weren't even allowed to keep photographs of their family members, and also in some camps, they're only allowed to write 1 letter a year. On top of the psychological and physical abuse by the camp administration and guards, and even other inmates, they were also forced to live in terrible conditions. They employed terror tactics to keep the population in line. They would make certain inmates stand for hours on end in a single position, or else they'd make them stand in very painful positions. They're subject to beatings, and they're subject to SA, as well as they're subject to extremely long labor hours with very little respite. Many were subject to frostbite and hypothermia as they were forced to live in these barracks that had very poor insulation. Diseases such as scurvy were rampant throughout the camp, as the rations that they were given were extremely meager. Coupling that with the poor sanitation, lice and other parasites took advantage of the situation, and that spread throughout the camp. Hunger was a horrible plague upon the prisoners, and there's even cases where some turned to cannibalism. Shortly after Stalin's death, they began what was known as the de-Stalinization, where many of these prisoners were released and rehabilitated. While I did say at the beginning of this video that 1.6 million people were killed at the camps, many historians argue that this number is quite a bit higher. There's a policy in place in the camps that if someone was near death or they had an incurable disease, they were released. So many of those people died shortly afterwards as well. Also, if you factor in the fact that these people's lives were drastically shortened after the camps, this figure rises to about 6 million people. Alexander Solzhenitsyn is one of the most famous people to